Well, good afternoon. Good morning to our friends on the West Coast. My name is Mark Maynard, and I am pleased to welcome you to the Washington Labs Academy webinar series. We hope you will find the next hour useful and informative. We have developed this monthly International Approvals webinar series to deal with some of the technical and administrative issues that our customers face when obtaining global marketplace product approvals for electronics and electrical devices. We recognize that compliance engineering and certification challenges can be complex, and we're always looking for ways to support our customers. Before we begin, I want to go over a few housekeeping details. First, I hope everyone can see the title slide on your computer. We have muted everyone's microphone to keep the audio as low as possible. The recording presentation is underway and will be sent to all attendees. A full screen view may be preferred. You can do this by selecting View and Full Screen, then use Escape to return to normal view. We encourage questions during the webinar. You can submit a question by enabling the chat or Q&A icon located at the top or side of your screen and typing the question to the host. We will go through all the questions in the presentation as time permits. We'd like to hear from you. You can see contact information here and at the end of the presentation. Please reach out via email to academy@wll.com or to the speakers directly. We estimate the presentation will take about 1 hour with questions for time at the end. I'm your presenter today. My name is Mark Maynard, and I'm the Training and Business Development Manager for Washington Labs Academy. I also work for American Certification Body, a sister company, as the International Approvals Business Development Manager. I've worked for over 30 years in compliance and engineering in areas such as EMC, EMI, telecom, wireless, product safety, design for the environment, and quality management systems. I'm a senior member of the IEEE and just returned from the IEEE EMC symposium that was held last week in Long Beach, California. If I saw you there and you're joining me here, I want to welcome you. I'm also immediate past president of the Product Safety Engineering Society, another society I work with actively, and be working on the committee for the symposium coming next year, which will be in New Orleans, Louisiana. Some vocabulary terms we may run into today. Local representative or local rep refers to an in-country agent authorized via a registered letter of authority to serve as official for an importing manufacturing company. This is not a compliance official per se, but somebody who can speak and act on behalf of the company in that country. GDP, PPP is gross domestic product on a purchasing power parity basis, which is found by dividing the GDP by the population of each country. It's a rough measure for the economic output per person and kind of a rough way to gauge market countries against each other as far as terms of what type of markets their economies will support and what the spending abilities are on average. Population is the world's population rank for each country. The first and most populous, China, and 237th the least populated, the Pitcairn Islands at 54. And where I get those figures from is the CIA World Factbook. It's a public domain website that allows you to freely use the information available there on the demographics of each country, as long as you give them credit, and so that's what I'm doing here. There's a URL to their CIA Factbook, the World Factbook, and here's the copyright notice that I'm getting this information on the maps and the country economic, population, and infrastructure, as far as telecom and wireless and things along those lines, all come from that site. It's a good way to research countries if you're thinking about entering them. So we're looking at China today. It's the world's leading economic leader. I guess I just duplicated myself there, but you know, they're the big guy on the block now as far in terms of economy. And they're situated right in the center of everything on the other continent. And so Southeast Asia below them, and to the west is the Middle East and India, and up above is Russia, and so Japan's to their east, as are the Koreas, and so they're well situated there. U.S. happens to be the largest trading partner. We take about 20% of their exports. So the latest estimate I have from last year, this is from CIA World Factbook, as I was mentioning. So they're approaching 1.4 billion. And so they are the number one in terms of GDP, PPP. They're the number one exporter. And their importer number has been going down, which means that they're providing more and more of their own materials. They've got, with the manufacturing strength they've got. They're also the world's number one producer of electricity, using mainly fossil fuels and water power. But there's also some use of renewables, wind, and sea power they're doing research on. They did become a member of the World Trade Organization a while back, so that really opened them up for trade. Growing urban and middle class population over the last 20 years really been increasing. It's over 50% of their city, the residents are in the cities now, in the urban areas. That compares to about 80% for the U.S. So they've still got a lot of growth potential there, even though they are the world's largest economy. Very educated population. The one statistic that always takes me aback is the number of engineering college grads that China produces is greater than all of our college graduates that we produce here in the U.S. So even with all our facilities for higher learning we have in the U.S., it's just a drop in the bucket compared to what they're putting through colleges. So that's just engineering alone, not counting all their science graduates and liberal arts and everything else. So over 95% literacy now, 13 years of schools on average. If they're not going to college, they're usually going to a technical school to learn a trade. Median age is on par with the U.S., slightly younger. High number of early tech adapters. They like their smartphones and IT products. They're number one in the number of mobile cellular phones in the country. They're number two in landlines. I had to look that up because I thought for sure they would be, but the European Union is shown on the CIA World Factbook is number one in world landlines now. They have the largest industrial base in the world for a lot of manufacturing, product development. If you buy most anything manufactured nowadays, it's a good chance you look on the back of it, it's going to say made in Japan. It is one of the world's fastest growing telecom markets, even though they've got a whole lot of products out there in the market. There's still, as you notice, 50% is urban, so that rural area is still needing a lot of telecom, stations and repeaters and things like that. Operates the world's largest telecom network. So combined with all, so they've got over 1.5 billion telephone connections. But as I was mentioning, those western provinces, the outback areas are still greatly underserved. So they're working on infrastructure projects in those areas. They're trying to discourage people from moving to the cities that are already well populated, like Shanghai and Beijing and the larger cities, to encourage growth in the other areas. So there's a lot of different approvals in China, depending on the type of product you've got there. We're going to be going over most of these today. We won't be covering a lot. The MPE has to do with throughput, and for IT equipment, the Gold Sunmark is to do with energy savings, sort of similar to the Energy Star program in the United States. Main ones we're going to concentrate on are the CCC and CQC for EMC and product safety concerns, and the SRRC for wireless, and the NAL for traditional telecom hardwired systems. So first we're going to look at the China Compulsory Certification, or CCC mark, that you're probably familiar with. This covers EMC and product safety. The parent agency is the CNCA, and that's where you're going to find the materials that you need for this agency. the China Certification and Accreditation Administration, or the CNCA, and they have 3 departments underneath them. CNAB, China Accreditation Board for Certifiers, CNAB Accreditation for Laboratories, and China Audit and Training Accreditation Board. This is very similar to the situation with the FCC and NIST, how they interact as far as auditing the certifiers and the accreditation for laboratories. And so you can think along those lines. CCC is not all inclusive. Doesn't mean you have CCC mark, you're ready to ship there. If it's got wireless or telecom approval, you've got to get those separate approvals. So, example I'll give here is a printer, copier, fax machine. Yes, fax machines still exist and actually used in China a lot. So if you've got with one of those with Wi-Fi in it, so you're going to need CCC for EMC and safety, the SRRC for the radio inside, which is the Wi-Fi, and the network access license, or NAL, for the fax and phone functions that connects to the hardwired, traditional telephone office infrastructure. The HS codes are required. You've got to use the ones, although they're international, make sure you're using the list that China's CCC provides. I've highlighted in yellow some of the more common ones that our customers use, but they're adding to these all the time, and make sure you're looking for the latest. I'm going to provide some web sites for you when we get to the CCC portion, and also for the other agencies where you can find this information. So the way they look for the EMC standpoint, if the highest frequency of a product is greater than 108 megahertz, then they're going to conduct tests on telecom port, and radio testing up to 6 gigahertz required. So sample is required if it has RJ45 port, and the highest clock frequency is above 108 megahertz. So for most everything nowadays, it's going to be yes, it's going to have EMC testing as far as ITE equipment goes. And a lot of the Internet of Everything, IoT equipment, is having this Internet connectivity also. Class A and B, similar to the US FCC. Class A is for business use, Class B for home use. If you do have Class A, there's some required notifications that have to be in the user manual and on the product itself. And here's some example labels given here. Critical components are a little bit different in China. Make sure you're looking at them. So they have these column headings, name type, material, manufacturer notes. And so when you go to the list, which you can get from the website, you'll find they're looking at things like the motherboard, switches, things to do with the video, antennas, RF components, anything used for EMI control, your power cables, filtering. All those types of things that are the typical heavy hitters as far as EMC goes, the typical problem areas. It's also they do have some EMI requirements, so lightning surge protection. They're looking at the same type of things. They're going to be looking at those gas discharge tubes, variable resistance, service orders, all those things that you have in place to limit the amount of surge that can get through and damage the equipment. For safety, typical things you would expect, and they're going to have to be marked specifically, as all this information here is going to have to be provided that you would expect if we're normal in the U.S. if you're doing nodal application, type materials, who makes it, where it was made, what standards it conforms to or has compliance to. They are a CB scheme country, and they will accept the CB test reports that cover the China mandated deviations. It's got to have those deviations in there. If you've got a CB report and it doesn't, you can go back and get that report amended and get those added in, or you can do a whole new report just for China. But there's 4 different CB schemes. Only 2 are accepted in China. That's the tested at manufacturing premises, or the TMP program, or the WMT, which is more common, witness manufacturing testing, the witness testing that you're used to with UL and others. These other 2, S manufacturing testing, recognized manufacturing testing, do not apply for China for the CB scheme reports that are used for electronics and electrical equipment. So you want to make sure you check those CB reports. You'll need to see these things in there, where it says what type of scheme, CB scheme. The upper one here, you see that EMP, the lower you see WMP. You'll see one of those two in there under the where it complies to the requirements section. Or in here, they have additional information if necessary on compliance. Make sure those reports have that in there, or they will not be accepted by China as a CB report. Also have, if your equipment needs to conform with the high altitude and humidity, GB or the CCC standards, and so they've got two different standards there for these, and one's a China standard specifically, the other is pretty much 6950. For labeling, they're pretty strict on this. You've got to have permission if you're going to print your own labels. You have to have a certificate for printing labels, and you have to file an artwork, and it goes through a process just like a product approval. So you can purchase directly from them in different sizes to apply to your product as an individual label, or you can get permission printed on your own label, which most companies are doing, large manufacturers are doing. Information has to be on there as the standard stuff you would expect. The manufacturer name, however, the additional requirement is everything has to be in simplified Chinese. That's the official language of People's Republic of China or mainland China. Taiwan, by comparison, uses traditional Chinese, and so you don't want to mix those two up. China will not accept traditional Chinese. This is Taiwan will not accept simplified. Simplified for China, People's Republic of China, and traditional is for Taiwan. Model number, country, all this stuff that would normally be on label, but you also have to provide it in simplified Chinese. Here's an example of what it would look like in the areas here. We block out these different model company names for confidentiality, but that's where it would go. You want company name in Chinese, product name in Chinese. The product specification ratings have to be both in Chinese, and usually you have them in English, but they'll also have to have Chinese, and then the country of origin in Chinese. So I happen to know, I don't know a lot of Chinese. I know the symbol right here, which says made in China, that first one in the row, that's the symbol for China. So I'm assuming the other characters have something to do with manufactured in China. It's like a rectangle with a line through it. And now we're going to look at, for factory inspections, they do have requirements for factory inspections for the product. You're going to have CCC factory inspection certificates. You can have, if you have multiple factories, they can be all filed at the same time. However, they're going to start with the first one, whatever you designate as your first one. Once they've inspected it and it's passed, they'll go to the next one, So you want to allow yourself some extra time. It's a serial process, not a parallel process. If you have different types of products, you may have had your product tested for audio-video materials or products, and we're seeing the approval for that. But however, now you're going to start manufacturing ITE equipment. That means you've got to get another inspection for ITE factories. And so if you're doing different types of products, you got to change. However, if you got one factory that's making audio-video products, you've got to inspect it, it's passed. And you're making more different types of audio-video products. That's fine. It's already had the inspection for audio-video. You just add it to the certifications. So CCC and CQC is a little bit different. So both under the CNCA. However, CCC is for required stuff, and CQC is for the voluntary stuff, which may be a marketing decision. So check your HS codes. Make sure you've got what you need. As far as, if it's listed in HS code, that's mandatory. It has to have CCC approval. If it's not on that list, then they can follow the CQC certification. This may be the case of, large government accounts or military. Some large companies are going to require that because they want some due diligence done on their products that come into them to make sure they're going to be safe to operate and they're not going to interfere with other products. So let's say CQC is voluntary, but it may be a marketing requirement. Here's some websites for you. Checked out this morning. Everything is out there. So they do have a regulations homepage on the CNCA website. Remember, that's the parent agency for CCC program. They have labeling rules on CNCA. This was used to only be in Chinese. Now they've got it in English also. And remember, that's simplified Chinese. And then they have a CQC website in English language. So you can reference these to get more information. And next, we're going to look at MIIT, which is Ministry of Industry and Information Technology. And it's a telecom agency and spectrum authority for China, People's Republic of China. About 5 years ago, I think it was, they changed the name from MII to MIIT to add that technology onto it. So you may see some older references, but the official name now in English is MIIT. It was established in, well, I guess it was 10 years ago, time flies, in March 2008. And it's, you know, state agency, just like the FCC, responsible for spectrum management, regulating the, you know, like FCC regulates telecom and wireless, do the same types of things. But they also, the software industry and promotion of the nation's knowledge economy, they have some additional duties there that the FCC doesn't. So the way it's broken down under MIIT, you can branch out into the traditional telecom, hardwired information. It's a side note. I was calling AT&T here locally, wanting to get a landline installed in my house, which I had previously, and they sent me to the legacy department. Even AT&T was trying to sell me a VoIP service, internet phone, but I wanted a hardwired phone for, you know, emergencies and being able to reach me no matter what. And I was kind of referred me to the legacy. So I guess it's just old folks like me that are getting the landline still. Underneath their program is called Network Access License. That's traditional, you know, hardwired central office equipment. And then SRRC, State Radio Regulations Committee, that's for your radio type approvals. So anything wireless that communicates information, voice or data. So we're going to look first at TAB, the Telecom Administrative Bureau, that issues these now, or network access license. So MIIT is their parent company, and they direct the actions of TAB and control the processes. So TAB's in charge of the NOW certification program and the ones that run it. The network access license looks something like this one example given here. So if you're going to sell telephone, telecom equipment, hardwired equipment in China, you got to have that NOW certification. And so they want to make sure, just like we do here, that you're not going to interfere with existing networks, you're not going to take them down, you're not going to cause damage to other equipment connected there. And TAB is the agency that's processing and approving all these products. So 3 categories of devices: telecom, wireless, and network communication devices. So that could be like your routers, gateways, used for ITE equipment. Any products using public telecom networks are subject to mandatory NIL testing and approval. So they're just trying to make sure that everything works well and that they've adhered to all the requirements, legal and engineering-wise. Submittal process, you're going to have, once you submit it, you got, like most agencies, you got a document package you're submitting, test reports and documentation photos and all that type of paperwork, application forms you're going to send in along with product samples. And so they're going to do, may do some product testing depending on what type of submittal you're making. And they're going to do QA assurance. That's on your factories, make sure they're in place, they've got the right quality management system in place to make sure that they can duplicate and manufacture products that are just like the one tested, with the same limits and specifications. They have to be a registered domestic company with registered business scope shows advance to the specific product, so you've got to have a local rep in China if you don't have a business presence there, a business office, or actual company employee to act on your behalf. Certificates got to list both the applicant and the manufacturer, so if you're using the local rep to make there, it's going to have them listed as well as the manufacturer. You got to have that right ISO quality management system in there, so if you're making IT equipment, you got to make sure you've got the ISO 9000 series. No factory inspection required for there, but there aren't any annual license fees. So for the testing, licensing, and purchase of license code, so you got to send samples to a selected lab in China for testing. Make sure that they've done the right testing, right reports, review those reports, make sure they meet all the requirements, and then the client or agent's going to submit those to tab verification. They're going to review all the documentation, grant certificate. In certain cases, they may request a sample to check out. They always reserve the right to that. It's not normal, but they can do it. And then once you got the approval, you're going to apply for the purchase license code stickers. Testing has to be performed at a MIT authorized lab, and they've got to have the whatever products testing has to be in their scope. And it's product safety, as I mentioned, they will accept that CB report as long as the China-specific deviations are in there, or they can recognize the CCC safety test report if you haven't done it on behalf of that agency. You know, EMC standards are going to be different depending on what type of equipment you've got, but it's got to adhere to whichever one applies to that equipment. So for telecom standards, as you notice here, they're not exact. So those GB standards aren't exact IEEE equivalents. They usually put in a few specific things that are slightly different for China to deal with their large scales that they've got there and long distances. The signals have to travel over cables, and so there may be some additional things in there you've got to look at. So as we mentioned previously, so you got the now approval on your fax machine. Well, that's not it. You also have to do the CCC approvals, the EMC and safety. If it's got wireless capability, you've got to get SRRC. So there may be, in most cases there are, multiple certificates you've got to have to cover all the different aspects for China. Oh yeah, this is kind of important. On the previous one, if you are getting all three of those, you've got to get CCC and SRRC first before now will issue. You start everything off in parallel, but the now will be on hold until they get those actual CCC and SRRC certificates to review before they give their approval. Usually averages about 2 months, 60 days. And after the approval, the tab's going to issue a network access identifier. It's going to go on the labels. Those certs are good for 3 years as long as the product stays the same. If you change something, one of the critical components, you got to go for reapply for an approval, updated certificate. And they maintain the catalog of all approvals, and I'll show you the websites where you can that I'm providing. You can get to them from there. They don't always check at customs, required for the importer to present. So if they're bidding on a government project or state-owned company, which is a lot of the business there, state-owned companies. If a certificate is being renewed, the process starts 90 days prior, that's 3 months, to make sure you've got enough time to get the new certificate before the old one expires, because if you gap out on that date, then you've got to stop selling in that country until you get the new certificate. And they do market surveillance. Here's some sample labels for now, and has a code on there. And also has both Chinese and English language listed there. So here's some websites for you. The English language version for the CNCA ends you up on the China government English website, which doesn't have much information there relating to now. But the Chinese language websites, so we got the official website there, and MIIT's official website, and Google Translate. Does a somewhat good job of translating Chinese to English, but it's not always accurate, and you can't rely on those for official translations. If you need an official translated document, it's got to come from an official licensed translator in China. So don't rely on those for your certifications. Make sure that you're using official translated versions. Next, we're going to look at the wireless side of MIIT. And so that's the State Radio Regulations Committee for radio type approvals. And so here's their definition of what a radio is. Basically anything and any equipment that can transmit information, and no matter what the intended purpose is. You know, this is radio communication, navigation, location, direction finding, radar. It should be covered by this list they've got here. And other electrical appliances, that's the catch-all at the end. Other electrical appliances that radiate electromagnetic waves. So anything that's going to produce a E or H field is going to be fall under this definition. For any radio equipment that is exported to China, foreign business involved should possess a radio transmission type approval certificate issued by the Office of State Radio Regulatory Commission, the People's Republic of China. So you've got to make sure if you're exporting into China that you've got this taken care of. It's paperwork exercise, but to make sure you've got that if you're importing to China, in China. There's three types of categories of equipment, and within those three categories, 27 types of equipment. The wireless base station and covers a lot of non-consumer type stuff. The microwave comm equipment is also non-consumer. Short range devices is where most of the consumer stuff is going to fall in. You can get the latest listing from the website that I'm going to provide at the end of the SRRC section. Documentation photographs, it's pretty much the same thing you should, you know, for documentation. They just want to be able to see everything, and especially the label, where it's going to go, what it's going to look like. They may, if you've got to provide, you know, artwork, and in addition to possible samples for depending on the type of equipment. And if you're importing into China, you've got to require copies of supporting documents showing those SRRC approvals, either the test report or the certificate. And the MIIT requires issue the final equipment type approval test report covering the original submitted equipment. And this can only be issued by MIIT recognized test lab. Here's an example of SRRC cert. Let's print it on the front and the back. We've got the official stamps there, as you can see. If you go on the website here, you can search for the SRRC certificates to find, you make sure something's certified or your listing has appeared, because that's how they're going to check it at customs. Make sure it's showing up there. And so here's some websites for you. They do have an English language version. That certificates search web pages in Chinese, but with a little playing around, you can figure out how to use the numbers on your approval certificate numbers to get those. And there's also Google Translate, but once again, that's not official translations, but just to help you learn the general information available there. So in general, you know, now that's a WTO or World Trade Organization country, they're an open global market. They're having some issues with that, but you know, they're working with some working out some of the kinks in the process and making sure they're following all the rules for access and everything. It can be challenging with cultural laws and regulations in that country. There are frequent new and updated regulatory requirements, especially for new technologies that are applied there and around the world. So you got to make sure you're working with knowledgeable, experienced partners that know the agencies, know the processes. Make sure you're going to get where you're going, so you don't have any unwelcome. You know, if you're shooting for your, you know, shipping worldwide date, make sure everybody's going to be approved by that date for all the countries you're wanting to ship to. China's one of them, and being the powerhouse it is economically, it is a very attractive market. Occasional trade issues can present challenges like the tariff situation that's going on now. Probably doesn't help anybody, but there it is. And so this is one of those occasional trade issues. You can see you can kind of slow things up and get them up to work. But join industry affinity groups, the IEEE, Telecommunications Body Council, ITU's International Telephones Union, so they can get the latest changes, updates with these programs and regulations, and get kind of some advance notice of things that might be coming into effect. The IEEE EMC Society, IEEE Product Safety Society are the two best groups I've found within the IEEE for compliance, regulatory compliance issues and concerns, and it's a good way to network with your peers. There are different companies can share information with you. Also, LinkedIn has a bunch of good user groups. You can create your own group, but there's a bunch of them out there. You know, just search for international compliance or global compliance or any terms like that, and you'll find dozens of them. And just look for ones that you think are good exchanges for information. Now I'm going to look at the questions. Okay. Somebody has informed me that there was Dan Romaine that changes recently in CCC. You can no longer purchase them. You have to print them. So and the process is different. Well, I haven't seen that, so I'll have to research that and get back with you. So I apologize if that's old information, but as I mentioned, these things are changing all the time. So you know, you have to make sure that you're keeping up with the latest, and evidently I didn't on the labeling. Ethernet switch, had a question. The Ethernet switch need to go to null if it's using a telephone exchange, central exchange system type environment. It would, and it may, depending on its applications and possible use, if it possibly could be used in that situation, they'll want to test it. And I've got some more information. I'll show this information I've got here. They're giving me off the I'm getting a lot of good information here on the CC mark. So. So March 15th of this year, this was implemented, so I'll read what I've got here. The CNCA, Accredited Regulatory Commission, announced that they were reforming management of the CCC mark. So it was announced in number 10 on 20 March 2018. Manufacturers may now press the CCC mark without permission or corresponding audit fees. Well, that's a welcome change. So you no longer have to do the process of submitting for printing labels, and you no longer have to pay those fees. Mark format has been simplified and unified. For example, the letters such as S, safety, S and E, safety, and EMC, F, firefighting, etc. Next to the CCC don't need to be marked anymore, so it's just a CCC label. And I had a question. I've heard that the 13.56 megahertz RFID is not required to have SRRC approvals. Please confirm. I'm not aware of that exemption, but I will look it up and get back with y'all on what I find out. So basically, that was the from the chat. Let's see if we've got Q&A. Okay, now I'm at Q&A, and I've got more questions. The question is the focus on ITE. The presentation I gave today probably is kind of heavily focused on ITE, but this could apply if you've got medical device, test and measurement equipment. This is the same process basically, but there's different standards that are applied. The MC standard for ISM or industrial and scientific measurement equipment is different than the one for ITE equipment. The same with the product safety requirements. So there are different standards involved, but the same requirements are going to apply as far as CCC is there. And question, is there a website to search CCC certificates similar to the one for SRRC? If there is, I'm not aware of it. It's possible it is in Chinese language, but I'm not a Chinese speaker or fluent, so I haven't found one. If anybody's aware of that, I'd like to hear about it. So I think that's all the questions I got for today. I want to thank y'all for attending. Appreciate y'all joining in. We've got all my events for the year. I normally post the IEEE events. We just had the EMC Symposium last week, so I'll start posting about next year's EMC Symposium. Will be in July in 2018 in New Orleans, Louisiana. That'll be a good one. And here's my contact information. If you want more information on China or to follow up or information on your upcoming projects, be glad to assist you. And I hope you join us for our next International Approval webinars. In September, we're going to be covering Japan, October on Taiwan, and South Korea on November 8th. Kind of take a tour of the big markets in Asia for the next 3 months, including China today. Go see more listings at the URL listed below for the Washington Labs Academy, and you can sign up from that page also. So once again, I want to thank y'all for joining me today. Let me know anytime I can be of assistance, and appreciate your attending these. Let your friends and colleagues know about them. And if there's ever any thing you need to look into, or you want to share some information, or even if there's future presentations you'd like to see, if there's specific countries you want to see covered or regions, send me an email on that also. This concludes today's webinar. On behalf of myself and the entire Washington Labs Academy team, I would like to thank you for attending. Please be sure to contact us with any additional questions or how to find out how we can make your next project a success. I'll now close the meeting. Thanks and goodbye.